This is 9/11 Free Fall.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 9/11 Free Fall. My name is Andy Steele, and I am the host. Tonight, we'll be joined by Richard Gage, Henry MacLean, and Roland Angle. They'll be talking about a new development regarding AE 9/11 Truth and the AIA. This is an important one, and you'll be hearing all about it in just a moment.
The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
I am joined today by three individuals who have done a lot of work in trying to get the message out about the World Trade Center evidence. They're going to be talking about a new development taking place in this effort that all our supporters should know about. First, we have Roland Angle. Roland graduated from the University of California, Berkeley with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. He served in the U.S. Army Special Forces, where he was trained in the use of explosives. He became a licensed civil engineer in California. He's now a board member with AE 9/11 Truth, and he's the lead person on Project Due Diligence, which we've talked about so many times here on the show. It's such a success. Roland, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Andy.
And he's joined by Henry MacLean. Henry is an architect and an educator, and he's a principal of the firm Timeless Architecture, which was established in 1988. His articles and projects have appeared in various publications, including the Boston Globe, the Northeast Sun, Architecture Boston, and Preservation Magazine. Henry, welcome back.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Richard Gage, AIA. He's a San Francisco Bay Area architect of 30 years. He's a member of the American Institute of Architects and the founder and president of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which represents more than 3,000 architects and engineers who have signed our petition demanding a new investigation into the destruction of all three World Trade Center skyscrapers on September 11th. And he's appeared in more than 600 in radio and television spots. That's a lot of work there, and he's doing more work now today, appearing here on this show to update our supporters on some important matters. Richard, welcome back to 9/11 Free Fall.
Thank you, Andy. It's an honor to be here with you and our esteemed guests.
Well, yeah, we're drawing them all together today because we got some developments going on regarding our continuing education courses and the AIA that we know our supporters need to know about, and you are the perfect person to deliver it to them. So, Richard, first, remind our audience about what the AIA is, in case they're not aware, and what the CES credits are and the history of AE 9/11 Truths, awarding them to people who see our presentations.
Yeah, that's a mouthful for me, and I'll try to make it short. I've been a member of the AIA for decades, and most recently, since founding Architects and Engineers, we have sought to educate the architects primarily through the AIA because they have a system of education and a system of reaching out to hundreds of thousands of architects, chiefly through their 90,000 members who are dedicated to not only designing beautiful buildings, but ensuring that they are safe. And it's the safety issue which we have been focusing on to reach these architects through the conferences that are annual in state and regional and national venues put together by the American Institute of Architects. So we have, for instance, had a booth at least 5 or 6 of these national conferences, and they have been very successful. These evidence booths, and all of us on this call have been a part of that process, starting, way back 10 years ago in San Francisco when we had our first booth, and it was quite controversial because back then and even now, the architects, they don't know about the evidence, most all of them, because the American Institute of Architects has not even seen fit actually to issue one bulletin on the third worst structural failure in modern history. And that failure was Building 7, and it was due to fire. So here's normal office fires is what NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has convinced the American Institute of Architects that that office buildings can come down due to normal office fires for the first time in history on 9/11. So we think it's relevant to be there and to have a course that architects can take through the continuing education system that they have built up. And it's an approved course. They approved it 3 years ago. It's our course on Building 7. It's called the Third Tower. And we tell people about Building 7, about the official story about how it came down due to a series of local structural failures. And then what else happened? What is the other evidence that leads us to realize and conclude, based on the forensic evidence, that these buildings did not come down actually due to fire, but that they were brought down with explosive controlled demolition, all three of them, particularly this third tower, Building 7, which drops like a rock straight down uniformly, symmetrically into its own footprint in under 7 seconds after witnesses hear explosions. And in the pile afterward, we have the forensic evidence of thermite incendiaries. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming, and every one of these architects who took this course ends up agreeing with us substantially. There's always a few who don't, but the overwhelming success of the conclusion of these architects is that a new investigation is warranted, and many of them sign our petition demanding such. This should be a wake-up call to the American Institute of Architects, and so we not only have had our courses to hundreds of architects delivered through automatic means by them watching a video and taking a test, also by us appearing in their firms across the country with virtual presentations and live presentations that we've done many times with groups up to 60 or 70 people at a time. They end up agreeing. And the other effort we've done, therefore, is to go 3 years in a row to the business management meeting at the annual conventions of the American Institute of Architects to create a resolution that we tried to get them to pass, which calls for the AIA to call for a new investigation of the destruction of this third tower based on the evidence. And we got through just 3% the first year and up to 12% the second year. So we were on quite a roll until we were shut down. And shut down we were also in the continuing, well, the second shutdown was they denied our ability to have a booth, saying that our mission was incompatible with their mission. And we're wondering, well, wait, what's incompatible about creating buildings that can't fall down due to normal office fires? Well, that's not exactly our mission. Our mission is to educate them about what did bring these buildings down. It's extremely important that every architect know what the AIA did not tell them. And again, not even in one letter. So we were then denied the ability to show up at the booths where we pay $4,000 at the convention to have an exhibition booth. because it made people uncomfortable. Well, the truth makes people uncomfortable sometimes, and uncomfortable they also were last month when we received a letter from the American Institute of Architects saying that our courses, which were approved, have been our status as a preferred course provider has been revoked. And we were completely disheartened, of course, about this because the AIA has stepped on the wrong side of history yet again, the third time here. This is their third strike in our mind. They have said that our mission is incompatible with the mission, and therefore we don't want you teaching, paraphrasing here, our architects and engineers what really happened at the World Trade Center. And so now we are not able to educate the architects of the American Institute of Architects, the 90,000 members, any longer. And we're quite disappointed about that. And yet we will continue. We will not stop ever, as you'll see in the programs that we're going to be talking about today, to wake up the engineering and architecture professions.
Yeah, I'm looking at the letter. It was sent to Ted Walter, our Director of Strategy and Development, dated May 31st. I won't read the entire thing, but it says, lack of compliance with the letter and spirit of AIA standards for continuing education programs. And I don't know how that applies because we are simply educating people on a matter that is important to architects. The worst structural failure in modern history wasn't even hit by an airplane, falls straight down symmetrically in 7 seconds, as Richard has said. And shouldn't we have a better understanding of this building? Shouldn't we look at all hypothesis? I mean, we open it up to questions. We take all questions that are submitted to us, even the skeptical ones, the ones that may not agree with our position. And only through open dialogue can we arrive at some kind of truth. That is how science is done. But the AIA is not interested in having its membership know about this issue or take part in the discussion on this. Since the very beginning, they have tried to shut down any kind of discussion, and then this was the final straw. This was the final letter to try to shut down the last part of outreach that we do officially to its membership. Henry, you're a member of the AIA. I didn't mention that before. What is your reaction to this development?
Well, it's very unfortunate, as Richard said, and it's but I guess it's in line with what we've been going through this last year, for the last 3 or 4 years. We've had a group of folks here that I've been working with to help bring Richard and Leroy Halsey, and then before the whole group from AE 9/11 with working with Ted Walter in New York to essentially open up the conversation and have the conversation, which we've had successfully here for really the last 4 years. 2 different events with the AIA, the BSA, Boston Society of Architects, here in 2015 and in 16 with, again, Richard and Leroy. And then in 2017 with the USGBC, which is the U.S. Green Building Council, that had a joint conference with the Boston Society of Architects. We had a booth at that event, and we were working on this, what would have been the 4th event to happen this spring, with Roland, who's online here with us, and Leroy. And the workshop was actually accepted, and we were working through the details. This was after about 3 or 4 months of work directly with the president of the current president of the BSA. It's a new president brought in every year, and she supported it, and we were going through the final details, and then they wanted to put some restrictions on that event, one of them being stripping the ability of the architects attending to receive the CEU credits, which we frankly, saw as being intolerable, and we pulled together a group of 25 of us who wrote a protest letter to the president and the board, and unfortunately they reviewed that in mid-April and got back to us with the disappointing news that not only were they not going to take away those uncommon restrictions that they put on, but they were canceling the event and hopefully terminating their any involvement with the BSA and AE 9/11 Truth, which again was totally surprising to us, shocking to us, really, given the history and the the good support that we've had from Boston architects and engineers, 100 of whom signed a letter written to our congressman a year ago in support of the Bobby MacLean Act. So we've been doing, straight up support, and in line, we think. Many of us have been members going back, myself included, 30 years when I co-chaired the Committee on the Environment back in the late 80s, early 90s. So we see this as the efforts of AE 9/11 Truth and, the group of us that have been supportive, obviously, as totally in line with the efforts to communicate and educate architects on important aspects of fundamental aspects of our business. And I'm reminded of what happens when intolerance creeps into institutional prejudice, which in this case it seems to have. You end up with ignorance. It's unfortunate, and but it's also understandable, because I would say most people really in Boston and probably in the country still are unaware that a third tower fell on 9/11. I mean, to me, it was striking to me when I first found out about it 5 years ago, actually. So there's a sense that these people, and I think a lot of the people at the BSA and the AIA in general, colleagues of mine for many decades now, are good people and smart people. But there has been a black hole of information that's engulfed the whole discussion of 9/11. Really, I guess since, as you all know, but since the event itself.
Yeah, I find that when people dealing with them personally, they'll be a little bit more open-minded and be willing more to talk freely. But when you deal with institutions, people working in institutions, groupthink, that's where you tend to see more censorship take place. Now, Henry, if you mentioned it, I missed it. In all of this trying to get this presentation put on with the BSA, and they're wanting to put all these restrictions on you and inevitably canceling it, did they ever give you initially any kind of reason for all of this? Because it seems like a lot of hoops to jump through that other groups don't have to deal with.
Yeah, there was an event, and it's actually sort of lost in history, and we still need to follow up with. We haven't really had some of our questions answered, but there was an event or an altercation of sorts that happened back in 2015, which we understood to have been cleared up the following year when we weren't given booth space in 2016 at ABX, because I guess that same issue that Richard brought up that affected a lot of people at the AIA national conventions, that people were uncomfortable. They offered us an opportunity instead to host an event at the BSA space. To AE 9/11 Truth paid for the BSA space for this event that we held in 2016. So we were under the impression that all this was cleared up at that point. So these most recent concerns that were lodged and written up in detail by the president, again, we're still waiting for and going to be following up with further questions of why these restrictions were put in place and why the event was canceled. What happened in the interim is we've been sorting out our response. This other issue happened, as Richard just explained, where the AIA National canceled, and revoked the CEU status of AE. So we're essentially coordinating with you on this at this point, but again, still following up. We have a strong contingent of colleagues that represent other groups like the USGBC, like Northeast Sustainable Energy Association, where I've had several articles written and lots of discussion going on with colleagues there about this issue, and accepted that this is an important area to continue research in, and many of us support openly the work of AE 9/11. But again, the BSA is, I think, following in lockstep with their national, colleagues at AIA National, and so somehow this issue has gotten more under their skin apparently in the last year, and they felt as though they needed to take this action. So, as unfortunate as it is, but we are looking for more feedback on that, and hopefully we'll be hearing from them directly. But again, to shut something down because you can't talk about it doesn't really leave you an opportunity for that conversation we're looking to have. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, America in 2019, issues you can't talk about. And you see this overall, not just with the professional organizations like the AIA, but with all the censorship that's now taking place on YouTube or has been promised to take place on YouTube, with them removing videos and whatnot. I think it's a sign that we're actually gaining ground, that they have to go to these kind of draconian measures to silence facts, silence science. So, in one way I look for the silver lining in everything, and obviously it's not going to stop us. We're not going to quit. We're going to continue to deliver our message. We're going to continue to reach out to architects, and we're going to continue to reach out to engineers and wake those people up. And then slowly the membership of this organization, AIA, will change, and then leadership will come along that's more open to this
you
method.
mentioned a minute ago that 14% or 12% that we had in response to the 2016 resolution, represents close to 10,000 architects in the AIA, and that's probably just a fraction, because those are the people that are willing to be vocal about it, or willing to speak out about it, or cast an opinion about it. So it's probably much higher. And my sense is that the AIA will come around at some point, particularly when they start reviewing and seeing the reaction that Roland's project and others in the work of AE 9/11 has had and is having with our engineering colleagues.
Exactly. Now, Roland, I want to get your reaction. You're not an architect, so you're not a member of the AIA, but you deal with professional organizations through project due diligence. What's your take on this latest development?
I think it's pretty typical of the way things go when you set out to investigate a matter that is of some controversy, and in this case, an issue that's of great controversy. So we've started to make progress. Richard founded AE 9/11 Truth about 13 years ago. We've had to, in that time, investigate the reports, collect research, formulate a program, get an organization together that's capable of carrying out these tasks, and take it out to the public. And we have had a significant effect in more ways than one. But at some point, there's this paradigm of how things go in matters of such importance. And it's first they ignore you, and then they laugh at you, then they begin to resist. And I think what we're seeing now is that third stage. Mm-hmm. They're beginning to resist. And I think the people that have been on board with this for some time have a dog in the fight, and they don't want to admit that they're wrong. So it's normal, I think, that they're going to come back and try to stifle our message. They're obviously not able to, and the reason they're trying is because we're having an effect. and that effect is going to grow. And the reason why it's going to grow is because we have the facts on our side. And the only people that they can get to line up with them are people that willingly or unintentionally remain ignorant of the facts. So we're going out to them with the facts. And engineers and architects and other building professionals are people that have to deal with facts on a day-to-day basis. And they are going to, once they become aware of the facts, they're going to join us. And that movement is going to grow. And the AIA is going to have to reverse its position at some point down the road. There's no denying that. So it's just a question of us keeping going. And we've now got Project Due Diligence going, which had its genesis back in May of 2017 when I was sent down to the Alabama-Michigan Engineering Society and gave a presentation there to a bunch of engineers. And the response was overwhelming. And people were astounded, excited, concerned, alarmed, and they felt that this was information that they had not been apprised of. And that's not surprising because the NIST reports that purport to examine this event run well over 11,000 pages for both reports on the towers and Building 7. So not surprisingly, very few people, even engineers, have parsed through those reports and examined them in detail, which, thanks to our great staff of volunteers and researchers, has come up with the information that, condensed down, presents a very clear picture that the NIST reports do not explain what happened that day, and therefore we need another investigation, which, of course, Richard began calling for 13 years ago. So it takes a while, but it will happen. My father used to say that a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth even puts on its shoes. So I think that's the phenomena that we're seeing. Well, now we put on our shoes and we're set out on this journey, and because we are grounded in science and fact, we will prevail. It's just a question of time. So we need to put our shoulders to the wheel, keep moving, and we're going to see the tide turn. We're going to reach a tipping point, and it's going to be overwhelming. And I think we've already had an effect in the fact that many, many people around the country are suspicious about the events of 9/11, don't feel that the government has been truthful with them, and I think that's been a big factor in preventing further attacks of this sort. So I think we need to be positive, we need to be optimistic, and we need to keep going.
You know, it always struck me years ago when we had the resolution at the business meeting, and we would have our people like Richard, Dan Barnum, go up and present our side during their allotted time, and then there would be people that would be selected to try to oppose us. And what really struck me is kind of funny but kind of not, is that the people that opposed us, I mean, they would quote facts, quote unquote, that didn't even jive with NIST's official theory. So they didn't even really know the official story that they were defending. I mean, things that were proven wrong, even by NIST, that NIST couldn't even go along with them. So, I mean, that's what we're up against, is just put up some kind of information, some kind of theory as a shield. Don't bother to defend it. Don't be available for questions or inquiry on it. And I would just like to know, I would just like to ask the leadership of organizations like the AIA, I mean, you say you disagree with us about 9/11, but what if there ever is an issue that comes up where some official dogma is wrong? What recourse does anyone have to be able to challenge that through the AIA? Do they provide that, or will they go with any official story? Let's say that there's some issue that comes up in architecture that is provably false in their opinion. What can people do to try to bring attention to this? You know, to shut down any kind of discussion of issues like this, especially when it's so respectfully presented, when it's so non-offensive. We don't even blame anybody for planting explosives in the towers, nothing like that in the presentations. What recourse is there in their ranks to be able to challenge official dogma on some issue that is related to architecture. And I'm sorry, this is related to architecture because it involves these skyscrapers that were designed by architects coming down. It's engineering and it's architecture. They don't provide any kind of recourse. And this is why the credits are so important, because it's an incentive for architects to come and view the presentation. So I want to stress this for the audience. Part of the way that we got the virtual presentations was that we would have volunteers call the architectural offices and say, we have a presentation, we can do it at your firm. Your AIA architects can get their learning units in for the year, because that's part of maintaining your AIA status, is that you got to take a certain number of courses throughout the year and get those learning units in. Probably not a very convenient thing for most architects, so they can get it done at work and listen to a presentation on Building 7. And that would be the hook that would get us into the offices. And we had many hardworking volunteers doing this. So this is what kind of upsets me, because hardworking people got these presentations for us, and now that program is kind of on hold until we kind of retool and figure out what kind of hook we're going to use, or maybe assign them to calling a different part of society and doing that outreach. And it's really a spit in the face to all the people that care so much about this. Intelligent, bright, hardworking people dedicated a lot of their time to trying to educate people. And the very least that the AIA can do and AIA members can do is sit and listen. Richard, we've been doing this webinar every week for a long time. I don't even know how many years. And we've been offering credits, course credits for this. Just for our audience, are we going to continue doing the webinars?
We won't stop doing our webinars, which is essentially an AIA continuing education course. We're not going to be able to use that terminology anymore, but it'll contain the same content, because we have every week we have a 2-hour long presentation, 2 hours with questions and answers and additional information to give people beyond the content of the course itself. So we can't stop. We will be looking for additional audiences, and we'll market. We can market this course as a non-accredited course to the architects, and we have, I don't know, thousands of email addresses of AIA members. And gosh, you would think it, and we hope that it will be still as important to the education of these architects that they will want to know what's going on, that a third tower did come down, that unlike the AIA told them publicly, a board member misinformation in an effort to stifle our resolution calling for a new investigation at the AIA conference. They actually lied. They said, we know this building came down because of all the diesel fuel in it. It's all been, we've hashed this out. We've been through all of this. Well, that's not even a component of the official story, the diesel fuel. So we obviously need to educate these architects, and they say we've done these studies and so forth. Well, they haven't issued, I'm going to say the third time, one bulletin to even one architect in its membership over the last 13. Well, that's when I've been tuning in, but over the last 19 years almost now. So what service are they performing to their membership? So yes, we're going to continue and do these webinars. They're divided into 3 parts, by the way. The first part is 9/11 An Architect's Guide, Part 1, World Trade Center 7. We do that the first week of every month. Part 2 is the Twin Towers Explosive Destruction. We do that the second week. And on the third week, we do the Twin Towers and Extreme Heat. And it's just been a great educational tool out there, because every time we post our live event on YouTube, we end up getting thousands of views on it. So who knows where those are reaching to, but we need to find a greater reach, and we're looking at lots of options to do just that.
That's right, folks, and that was sort of a rhetorical question on my part. I know we're not going to quit doing the webinars. We're not going to quit doing what we're doing. We've been doing it so long now that something like this, I mean, to us personally, is barely a blip in the radar. Plus, we got so many awesome things going on right now with the Building 7 study coming out and the great work that Roland is doing. It's too bad for the AIA, because at some point they're going to find out that they were on the wrong side of history, and there's going to be some apologizing going on. Maybe they'll wait a little while, maybe a few years, to try to justify it, but in the end, the next generation is going to say, yeah, we really missed the mark on that one, and how do we prevent that from ever happening again here at AIA? I can see it now. So I heard an architect recently mention that many architects don't even think that they're considered an architect unless they have those 3 letters after their name. And I want to ask this of Richard and Henry. We'll start with Richard. I mean, has that been your observation? And what does the AIA actually do for architects besides providing the 3 letters after their name and some kind of validation that they're associated with that organization?
Just real quick, I'll give you a couple, and then I know Henry will have a lot to share on this because he's had many interactions with them as well. But the most people, normal people like our listeners here, because of the incredible job the AIA has done in marketing themselves and their members, that most people don't even think an architect is licensed as an architect unless they have the AIA. But really, you pay your $400 or $600 and then that gets you the AIA name, and that's why most of the members do it. Of course, many others do it for the very exceptional educational, well, let's not call it exceptional given our current theme here of this conversation, but otherwise exceptional effort of educating their architects about technical and design opportunities and issues. But here's where they have a massive failure, an F on their face, and they will come to regret these sets of decisions to sweep under the rug the truth about what happened at the World Trade Center.
Henry, same question.
Sure. Well, I can just add that, my involvement with the AIA began back 30 years ago when I became committee chair of this, what was then the Architects for Social Responsibility. There was a group of people who were opposing our involvement with relying on nuclear energy and shifting it over to renewables, and so that was my first involvement with which that committee really turned into the Committee on the Environment, which is a group that's done, in my mind, and many of us who have been supportive of it, a great job at promoting interest in understanding what's going on with the climate and leadership in environmental or energy and environmental design that was developed by the USGBC. U.S. Green Building Council was essentially an extension of that work that came out of the great efforts of many people volunteering their time to promote better understanding of environmental concerns. And my interest in this goes back, when I was as an undergraduate and my Bachelor in Science and Environmental Design at the University of Massachusetts in the 70s. So there's been a long, and I've tried to make this comparison in terms of concerns. I know there's a split understanding about this. For those listening in support of the work of AE 9/11 and the 9/11 Truth Movement, I refer you to a great piece by David Ray Griffin describing this whole issue with getting into the discussion of that as well. So that's my history with the AIA going back, and I've over the years presented and learned a lot from colleagues and friends at the various conferences that I've been at, both national and the annual ABX, which used to be called Build Boston, which is the annual show of the What I can tell you as well is that the BSA has not always been a leader on that front. In fact, there was resistance, and a lot of folks that, I've made the analogy to climate denial and 9/11 truth denial being somewhat in the same boat, because we had these experiences 30 years ago when we tried organizing events around this issue, and were met with those who opposed us at the Boston Society of Architects, and it was groups like the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association who were leading the way, and the BSA eventually came around, and the AIA eventually came around on that issue. So I think there's certainly a lot of larger firms and corporate presence in the BSA and probably the AIA National. I know many architects who are not AIA members for that reason. I've chosen to stay loyal and stay as a member, and I think on this issue, as Richard said and Roland just said as well, we're having an effect, and it's an uncomfortable conversation. People don't always understand or want to believe that there's really any use in discussing what happened at that event 19 years ago. But then again, when we look at current patterns of what's going on with our foreign policy, some of the things that were shut down at the time of 9/11 as a result of all this, we see the common patterns today. So my sense is that this national abscess, one way of looking at it, is got to be resolved, and will, as Roland says, will be resolved just by the natural tide of events and the way we're moving. So I'm hopeful as well. I feel like I can keep this conversation going with my colleagues here who are still not wanting to discuss it. I gave a presentation on sustainability issues to Simpson, Gumpert, and Hager at SGH, who was one of the contributors to the FEMA report on 9/11. Actually, I did this a few years before I sort of woke up to this notion, and I've had conversations since then with some of these individuals, architects and engineers over there, and yeah, they just don't want to broach the subject, but some are, and I think that the tide will eventually turn in our favor.
Now, we've had a lot of success with local engineering groups and a lot more welcoming from them. I mean, I've had all of the project due diligence people, and I haven't even had all of them, just a good number of them on here talking about their presentations and the reactions of the audience, and very positive reactions they report to me. And I don't know, it just seems to be more welcoming from the engineering community than architectural. Roland, as an engineer, why do you think that's so?
Engineers play a different role in the building process than architects do. Architects are big picture people. They're conceptual people. They're looking at the social impact of their creations. They have some background in the sciences and the mathematics that's necessary to make this happen, so they can work within that realm effectively. But engineers are more detail-oriented and concerned with actually making sure that something works. So we work together in this building process, and the architects are usually the people that conceive of the project, and they bring their project to the engineers and they say, help us make this work. So engineers are focused on whether this particular concept is going to work or whether it's going to fail. So they're very reality-based. And I think that in this case, the event which took place in 2001 was of such a magnitude that it was stunned all of us. in a way. I think there were some engineers who tell me, well, I looked at that happened that day, and I just said that couldn't possibly have happened. Others were waiting for the studies, which would inevitably follow. So the studies came out the first one on the towers came out in 2005, and the Building 7 came out in 2008. And the studies were massive studies, of course, and I don't think that most engineers had the time or the energy to delve into those reports in great detail, because after all, they're making a living for the most part. It fell to people like myself who were, by this time, reaching the end of my career and had more flexibility in my time, more opportunity to begin to investigate. And I, of course, was brought into the field of investigating this particular event by Richard and his presentations, in which he purported, he put forward the notion that the buildings were brought down by explosive demolition. And I saw the merit in his conclusions based upon the evidence. So I think most engineers, when you present them with a logical, scientific-based explanation for why something happens, they're definitely open to it. I think what was missing for us was a critique of the official reports. And I think once we began to look into the official reports and comb through them, we found the details that we needed to show that their analysis could not possibly be true. And so we put together Project Due Diligence, which is an explanation of those findings. And we've had overwhelming, in fact, unanimous support for our position when we present that to engineers. We've made a total of 13 presentations now. In those presentations, we've presented our evidence to more than 160 engineers, and none of them, we've never had an engineer say at the end of our presentation that they believed the NIST reports stood and represented our professional opinion accurately. So once we were able to collect this information and present it accurately, I think it's a slam dunk. We're at 160 to nothing. There's no engineer, when presented with this evidence, can deny that the official story for why these buildings collapsed does not meet our professional standards and should not be allowed to stand. So it's a matter of putting one foot in front of the other. Engineering work is always slow, tedious, sometimes even boring work, but it has to be done. And as we have done this, we have found when we present it to our engineering colleagues, they are 100% with us. They get it. And like the architect's experience with the AIA leadership, we're getting pushback from the leadership, particularly from the ASCE leadership, because the ASCE and their Structural Engineering Institute was brought into the investigation and the preparation of the reports from day one. So they have their professional reputation on the line, and it's understandable why they would be reluctant to hear what we have to say. However, the scientific process demands that our evidence be heard, and unfortunately, they're taking the position, like the AIA leadership, that they don't want to have any discussion any further. Well, that is a violation of their ethical code. So we have to press forward, and we'll do what it takes to get it in front of the membership. And we're absolutely 100% confident that once we do get it in front of a significant portion of the people in our professions, we will force them to change their position.
Now, I've only got a few minutes left here, so I'm going to give the final thoughts here to Henry and Roland, starting with Henry. Henry, what do you want the audience to take from this, and carry on with in their minds and hearts moving forward?
Well, as I mentioned to Roland earlier, we were talking, I think this recent event that happened with Jon Stewart, taking the cause of the 9/11 first responders to Congress last week, or it was the week before, might be also a good sign in that people are have a, as Roland said too, this was such an overwhelmingly powerful event that still ricochets around in people's heads. They know exactly where they were the day of 9/11, and so the notion that just the people who took care of, tried to take care of those victims, they weren't properly taken care of. It's taken this long to get them compensated properly. In the fact that this could be done by a national voice like Jon Stewart's, in a pretty much quick turnaround when the media got on the right side of it. So, I'm hopeful that we are at that point, as Roland said again, about resistance that's going to transfer to a better understanding, and for all of our colleagues who in the building industry who care deeply about the nobility of our profession and the integrity of standing behind something that's real and truthful. This runs right to the core of it, and so I think there's going to be room, even with those my colleagues here at the Boston Society of Architects who are still in denial about this. There's an opportunity that's not that long away that they're all going to come around. So I am hopeful.
Roland, same question. Final thoughts to leave the audience with.
I think we should be optimistic. I think we should take this as a sign that we're being effective, that we're making progress, that we're moving forward, and we're beginning to form the lines. And the lines are clear. Either the official reports accurately explain what happened that day and we should stand behind them, or they don't. And we should have another investigation that is free of political bias and interference. And once we do that, we will find out what the truth of the matter is. And I'm a big fan of the truth. I stand behind issues where I know the truth is on my side. I want to be on that side, particularly as a building professional, somebody who has a license that requires that I stand up for the public safety, that I speak out about issues that affect the public safety if I know that my voice is required, and this is certainly one of those cases. This is a historical event of immense scope that's actually one of the reasons that it's so difficult to approach. However, we shouldn't let that difficulty stop us, and I think that we are well on the road to making the public aware. We as architects and engineers stand in the middle of this whole question because this particular historical event came down right in the middle of our profession. We are the experts. We need to make our voice heard. Once our voice is clear, once we can make it clear that our profession does not stand behind the official reports, we do not accept them, we do require a new investigation, I think once the general public becomes aware of our stance, then that's going to be the tipping point.
Richard Gage, Henry MacLean, Roland Angle, thank you for all the hard work you're doing, ever upward, and thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Freefall today. This program is on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also keep track of the archives by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.